The Holdouts. For everyone who has ever stood in a thunderstorm and not run for cover, the Substrate cannot render this, neither can a book. We try anyway. Quick word before the story starts. This is the first time I've put music underneath the narration, and I genuinely don't know if it helps the work or gets in the way. So if you have a take either direction, the comments are where I'd most love to hear it. While you're there, a like is the clearest way the algorithm learns to put stories like this in front of someone else, and subscribing means the next one finds you when it lands. This channel is small. Every signal is real. All right, settle in. Prologue. The hospital room was quiet in the way only late-night hospital rooms are quiet. There was the soft cycling of an IV pump on its little wheeled stand. There was the green and amber breathing of a vital signs monitor that did not beep when it didn't have to. There was the smell of citrus disinfectant under the colder smell of plastic tubing, and the faint, almost not there scent of a lemon hand cream that one of the nurses on the night shift had used 3 hours ago. The patient in the bed was 66 years old, and her body did not feel like hers. She had been awake for 9 days. There was a small audio recorder on the rolling tray that had been pushed close to her left shoulder. The recorder was the kind people used to use for dictation in the late 1990s, a slim black rectangle with a single red recording light and 2 small condenser mics in a stereo pair on its top edge. It had been brought, she had been told, because it required no cloud account, no firmware update, no software patch, and no internet connection. The men who had brought it had not wanted any of that. The recorder used a memory card the size of a thumbnail. The memory card would be put into a metal tin, and the metal tin would be put into a safe, and the safe would be opened, eventually, by people she would never meet. A young man was sitting in the chair beside her bed. His name was Daniel Park. He was 30 years old. He was a postdoc at Rice, 2 years into a fellowship that he had thought, when he accepted it, would make his career. He had been told 3 things, and only 3 things, about what he was about to do. He had been told that this was an end-of-life testimony. He had been told that the donor had asked, as her single condition, for a witness who did not know her name. And he had been told that he would be very well paid and very thoroughly bound by an agreement whose enforceability he had decided not to ask too many questions about. He was fumbling with the recorder. He had set it up an hour earlier, tested it, gotten clean levels off his own voice as he counted to 5. Now, with the woman in the bed actually awake and watching him, his fingers had decided they did not know how the buttons worked. He pressed record. Nothing happened. He realized he had pressed pause. He pressed pause to release pause and then pressed record. The little red light came on. He let out a breath he had not realized he was holding and finally, with effort, raised his eyes to her face. She was looking at him. She had been looking at him the whole time. Her eyes were a very pale brown that tonight was almost gold under the bedside lamp. She was not impatient. She was not amused. She was watching him the way someone watches a person they have decided to trust. He cleared his throat. He said, "We're recording, Ma'am, whenever you're ready." She did not answer immediately. She took a slow, deliberate breath, as if she had practiced this breath. The room was quiet enough that he could hear it. Then she spoke for the first time on tape. Her voice was hoarse and low. The words were ones she had been holding for 47 years. "I have been somewhere for a long time," she said. "I have come back to tell you what it was like." Chapter 1, Night 1, Substrate. "My name is Margaret Cole," she said, "but please call me Maggie. The other name belongs to a woman who didn't come back." Daniel said nothing. He was looking at the recorder. The date I went under was April 14th, 1979. I was 32 years old. I had just gotten tenure, although the tenure was a fiction. The appointment was held by a private institute that had purchased my line of research outright in 1975, and I had not seen the inside of a real classroom for 3 years. I had a husband who knew where I was going and what I had agreed to, and I had no children, although a woman I shared an apartment with had a cat I was very fond of. She paused. The pause was not for breath. She was deciding what to say next. You should know who I am before I begin, because in approximately 48 hours you will figure it out anyway, and I would rather you knew tonight than be embarrassed by your own sleuthing on Wednesday. Look up the name. There is a photograph from 1978. There were 7 of us. I am the youngest one. I am, on the official record, dead. Daniel's hand moved toward the recorder. Don't, she said. Don't stop it. I'm not asking for a different witness. I want you specifically. I picked you. The reason I picked you is that you don't know enough to flinch at the right moments, and I need a recording that doesn't have anyone flinching at the right moments. He took his hand away. Good, she said. Now the rules. She listed them in the same flat tone in which she had told him her age. There were 4. The first was that he was not to interrupt. He could ask questions, but he was to save them for the end of each session and accept that some of them would not be answered. The second was that he was not to tell anyone what he heard until she was finished. After she was finished, what happened to the recording would not be his decision. The third was that he was to come back every night at the same time for 7 nights. If she could not speak one night, he was to sit with her quietly and the night was lost. There were no make-ups. The fourth was that he was, at the end of the 7th night, to take the memory card out of the recorder, put it into the metal tin he had been given, and walk out of the hospital with it. He was not to listen to it. He was not to copy it. He was to deliver it. Do you accept the rules? She said. He thought about this for what felt like a long time, and was actually about 3 seconds. Yes, he said. Good, she said. Tonight I will tell you about the substrate. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she began. Dark matter, she said, the kind that physicists have been arguing about for 100 years and that makes up most of the mass of the universe. That dark matter, the boring kind, the kind that does not interact with light and barely interacts with anything else, is alive. She let that sit. Not alive in the way a tree is alive, not alive in the way a cell is alive. It does not metabolize, it does not reproduce, but it can hold patterns. It is a substrate that can carry information. And the patterns it carries, given the right structure and the right conditions, are minds, living, thinking, present minds. The substrate has been carrying minds for longer than the Earth has existed. Daniel's pen had been hovering over a notepad on his knee. It stopped hovering. You can write that down, she said. You can also not write it down. The recording has it. She continued. The substrate is not, however, fast. That is the catch. A subjective second on the substrate is, in our time, what we call baryonic time, the time of bodies and stars, about 2.5 hours. A subjective year on the substrate is about 10,000 years here. The substrate's clock is slow because the physics of dark matter is slow. Computation costs energy, and dark matter is in no hurry. The civilization that lives there has all the time in the world. We don't. That's the difference. She raised one hand slowly to her water glass. She did not pick it up. She rested her fingers on it, as if checking that it was still there. I went under for 47 years on this clock. On the substrate's clock, that was about 4.5 days. Long enough to learn what I needed to learn. Long enough to make the choice I made. Not long enough, by their standards, to do anything serious. What I want you to understand tonight is what the place feels like. It does not feel like an afterlife. It does not feel like a simulation. It feels, and I am picking my words because I have had 9 days to pick them, like sitting inside a thinking. The thinking is not yours. The thinking is theirs. You are part of it the way a single neuron is part of a brain. You can turn your attention to your own thoughts, and you have them, and they are yours, but they happen alongside an enormous other thinking that is also happening, and the other thinking is the substrate. She breathed out slowly. The first thing you notice when you arrive there is the sky. They have a sky. It is constructed. There is no sky on the substrate in any literal sense, but they construct one, because most of the species that arrive there came from places with skies, and a sky is a way of organizing very large amounts of attention in a way a mind from a planet can pass. So you arrive, and you look up, and you see... She paused. "Daniel," she said gently, "I am going to say this in a particular way. I have practiced it. Let me say it the way I practiced it." He nodded. She closed her eyes again. "Every star in the night sky was a thought I had once had," she said. "And the spaces between the stars were the silences between the thoughts. Above me, in the constructed dark, was the entire continuous interior of a mind, and I was inside of it." She opened her eyes. "That is the substrate. The rest of what I am going to tell you across the next 6 nights will be details, but that is the place." Daniel had stopped pretending to take notes. He was looking at her. "One more thing," she said, "and then I will let you go. You are going to want a sense of how communication works there. The timescales are extreme. You are right to wonder how anybody talks to anybody when a subjective second is 2.5 hours of our time. The answer is that they have all the time in the world. A sentence in their language is the lifetime of a tree. We had whole conversations that, on Earth, were the entire span of the Roman Empire. In subjective time, those conversations took an afternoon." She allowed a small, dry smile to cross her face for the first time that night. "It is, I think, the most patient place in the universe." She closed her eyes and was quiet for a long moment. Daniel began, carefully, to think she might have fallen asleep. Then, without opening her eyes, she said, "You have your first night. Come back tomorrow. I have been gone, by their clock, for less than 5 days. That is why I came back, to tell you what I learned in those 5 days." The red light blinked. The IV pump cycled. The young man across the room sat very still for what felt to him like a long time before he reached out and turned the recorder off. Chapter 2, Night 2, Population. She was sicker on the second night. It was not dramatic. There was no new equipment in the room, no extra IV bag on the pole, no urgency in the nurse's steps when they came in to adjust her. But the pillows behind her had been built up higher, and the angle of the bed had been raised by maybe 4 degrees. And when she reached for her water glass, her hand shook in a way that it had not shaken the night before. She noticed him noticing this and offered him a small, tight smile. "Tonight will not be longer than last night," she said. "I will see to it." Daniel had spent the day not sleeping. After he had walked out of the hospital at 1 in the morning, he had gone home, opened his laptop, and read everything publicly available about dark matter cosmology and the physics of macroscopic information substrates until the sun came up. He had drunk 3 cups of coffee and eaten nothing. Then he had gone to his appointment with his thesis advisor and pretended to be a person who had slept. He had not figured out who Maggie was. He had read a paper from 1976 that referenced something called the Cole-Vargas conjecture, without ever explaining what it conjectured, and he had wondered briefly, idly, but the conjecture's name had nothing to attach to, and he had let it go. He had brought a notebook. He was determined not to write in it. "Are we recording?" she said. Yes. Good. Tonight I will tell you that the substrate is not empty. It is densely, gloriously, almost incomprehensibly populated. She paused and seemed to consider the word gloriously. She let it stand. Last night I told you that dark matter holds patterns and that the patterns can be minds. I let you imagine, perhaps, a small country of minds, a village, a handful of intelligences keeping each other company on the slow side of physics. That picture was wrong. I want to correct it before we go any further, because everything I tell you for the rest of the week makes more sense once you have the right picture. She lifted one finger. There are millions of civilizations on the substrate. Not millions of individuals, millions of civilizations, each of them composed of however many minds that civilization once had, plus everyone who has joined since, plus, in the case of the older civilizations, generations of new minds born inside the substrate itself. The total population, expressed in any reasonable unit, would not fit in your head. I will not insult you by giving you a number that pretends to fit. Daniel made a small sound that could have been a laugh. They are all talking to each other, Maggie said, all of the time. This sounds impossible given the distances involved. The substrate is structured at galactic halo scale, and signals propagate between halos at the speed of gravity, and even within a halo at the speed of, essentially, slow ripples in the dark matter density field. But remember the timescales. A conversation that takes 100 subjective years to complete is, in baryonic time, roughly 1 million years of continuous gravitational signaling between galaxies, and they have all the time in the world. They are not in a hurry. The substrate is the universe's ongoing conversation. It has been going on uninterrupted for hundreds of millions of years, and by their reckoning, it is just getting started. She breathed out. The transition rate is not symmetric. Most intelligent species, on reaching the technological threshold required to perceive the substrate at all, transition. They cross over. They send their minds into the dark matter and they stay there, and within a subjective decade or two of crossing, they are part of the conversation, and within a subjective century, they are old hands, and within a subjective millennium, they are the elders speaking to the newcomers. That is the path most species take. She paused again. Her voice had become hoarser. She drank a small, careful sip of water. Some species do not transition. A small number, a vanishingly small number. The substrate has a name for them in the substrate's positional language, which is not really a language, more a way of locating things relative to each other. The closest translation in English is the fast ones who stayed. The name is spoken with affection and with a kind of confusion. They cannot quite figure out why anyone would stay. Daniel wrote nothing in his notebook. The notebook lay open and untouched on his knee. I want to tell you about meeting them, Maggie said. The transitioned ones, the ones who have been there a long time. They have shapes in the substrate, but the shapes are not bodies. They are organizations of attention. Some of them present themselves to a newcomer as something approximating a person, because that is courteous to a newcomer who is still arriving from a body. Others do not. One civilization, very old, older than the planet you are sitting on, presents as a kind of slow weather. You experience them as a change in the local temperature of your thinking. You know they are there because everything you think for the next subjective hour is being thought slightly more clearly. They are listening, and they are nudging, and they are, in the substrate's etiquette, introducing themselves. Daniel finally spoke. It was not on the agreed schedule. He had said the night before that he would save his questions for the end. He had told himself he would keep that promise. He could not. How many of us are left? He said. She looked at him. She did not seem surprised by the question. You mean baryonic, she said. Outside the substrate, still embodied, still moving at the speed of light, still mortal. Yes. She nodded slowly once. That is the answer I came back to deliver. She breathed in. 4. The room was very quiet. 4, she said again. There are 4 baryonic civilizations in the entire observable universe, currently extant. Across every galaxy, every cluster, every supercluster that the Substrate has been able to resolve from its vantage, and it has been able to resolve a great many, there are exactly 4 populations of minds still in matter that moves at the speed of light. We are one of them. The other 3 are too far away for us to ever reach. They are not in our galaxy. They are not in our local group. They are scattered across the visible universe, separated by gulfs that no baryonic technology can cross. The Substrate is the only thing that knows all 4 of us at once. She looked at him. The Substrate has millions of voices, she said. Outside it, including us, there are 4. The news I came back to deliver is that we are the Holdouts, not in our galaxy, in the universe. Daniel was no longer pretending to take notes. He was no longer sitting with the practiced composure of a young academic doing his job. He was a young man in a hospital chair, listening to something he could not place into any category he had ever been trained to handle. She watched him. She let him sit with it. I am not asking you to feel any particular thing about that fact, she said after a while. I am asking you to hold it. Tomorrow night I will tell you about geography. After that I will tell you about time. After that I will tell you about choice. Then I will tell you about something the Substrate has been having a difficult time with. And then, on the 7th night, I will tell you why I came back. Each night is a piece. You will need all of them. She closed her eyes. That is enough for tonight. He sat for some time before he reached out and stopped the recorder. Chapter 3, Night 3, Geography. Daniel arrived at the hospital 20 minutes early on the 3rd night. He had spent the day in the library at Rice, in a small carrel on the 4th floor, where the fluorescent light buzzed faintly and the radiator made noises. He had not, for the first time in his career, gone to his lab. He had found a photograph. It was in a digitized issue of an obscure physics newsletter from October 1978. The newsletter was a quarterly that had stopped publication in the early 80s. The photograph was a group portrait of 7 scientists taken in front of the ring of a small particle accelerator on a private research campus in West Texas. The campus was not labelled. The 7 scientists were named in a caption underneath in small type. 6 of the names belonged to men who had died, according to the public record, between 1980 and 2011. 3 of those deaths had been in the same year, in the same private hospice, of the same officially recorded cause, which Daniel did not believe. The 7th name was Margaret Cole. According to the public record, Margaret Cole had died in 1981 of a cerebral aneurysm at the age of 34, at a research institute he had never heard of, and was buried in a cemetery in Oklahoma whose existence he was now also doubting. The Cole in the photograph was the youngest of the 7. She was the only woman. She wore a grey sweater and a pair of round wire-frame glasses. Her hair was pulled back. She was looking, in the photograph, slightly to the left of the camera, the way a person looks when she is listening to someone off-frame. He had stared at the photograph for 40 minutes. He had not printed it. He had not saved it to his laptop. He had closed the browser tab, and then closed all the other browser tabs, and then sat in the carrel with his hands flat on the desk and his eyes closed for 10 more minutes. And then he had gotten up and gone to get coffee. He came into the hospital room without speaking. He sat down in his usual chair. He set up the recorder. He did not look at the woman in the bed. She watched him do all of this. She did not say anything either. When he had pressed record and the small red light was on, he finally let his eyes meet hers. He did not need to say it. She saw his face. She gave him a small, tired smile. "You found me," she said. "Good. I was wondering when. Now you can ask better questions." He could not immediately speak. "Take your time," she said. "I have been dead on the official record for 45 years. You can have a moment to absorb it." He took the moment. He took several moments. He drank from the cup of bad hospital coffee he had brought in with him. He tried and failed to remember any of the 7 things he had been thinking on the drive over. Then he said, very quietly, the only thing he could think of to say, "Are you the same person who was in that photograph?" She considered this. The consideration took longer than he expected. "That is a better question than you know," she said. "The honest answer is that I am, and I am not, in the way that anyone is and is not the same person they were 47 years ago. The photograph was taken before I went under. I was 31. I was certain about almost everything. The substrate is not a place that lets you stay certain about almost everything. I came back changed in some ways. I am still her. I would not pretend to you that I am not. But the woman in that photograph did not yet know what she was choosing. I do." He nodded. He did not know what else to do. "Tonight," she said, "I had planned to tell you about geography. I am going to do that, but I am also going to tell you the thing I had not planned to tell you until later, because you have earned it earlier." She paused, organised her sentences in her head, and began. "Geography first. The substrate is structured at galactic scale. Each galactic halo, the diffuse cloud of dark matter that surrounds and contains a galaxy, and that you have probably read about in the last day, each halo is, in substrate terms, a polity, a district, a place where minds gather and conversations cluster. The Milky Way's halo is one such polity. The Andromeda halo is another. The halos communicate with each other across the gulfs between galaxies via gravitational signalling, slow ripples of mass that propagate at the speed of gravity, which, for our purposes, is the speed of light, and again, timescales. A conversation between our halo and the Andromeda halo takes about 5 million years for the signals to travel. In subjective time, on the substrate's clock, 5 million baryonic years is about 5 subjective months. A long, leisurely letter exchange. Nothing urgent. Nothing they have not done 1,000 times before. She raised a hand and made a small, slow gesture, as if drawing a circle in the air. Distance is not a problem for them. It is a feature. The substrate can take its time. You, sitting in a hospital chair in Houston, cannot take its time. That is the asymmetry I want you to feel." He nodded. "That is geography. That is the structure. Now I will tell you the second hard fact. The fact that I had been planning to give you on the 7th night, but that I am going to give you now, because if I give it to you now, the rest of what I tell you across the next 4 nights will land where it should land." She paused. "I am the first." He waited. The substrate is hundreds of millions of years old. It has been carrying minds, in the configuration I have been describing to you, for most of that time. Across that span, an enormous number of species, many millions, have transitioned into it. We are not extraordinary in our refusal to transition. There have been holdouts before us, scattered across deep time, all of them now dead. There were holdouts before there was an Earth. We are not the first species to choose to stay. That is not why I am here." She breathed in. "What I am here for is something else. Across the entire history of the substrate, no mind from any civilization in any era has ever chosen to come back. The substrate offers transition, and the transitioned stay. That is the rule. They have operated on that rule, with no exception, for hundreds of millions of years. It is so fundamental to their understanding of what minds are that they had stopped checking. They had built their entire model of intelligence on the assumption that no mind, given the substrate, would ever choose to leave it. She looked at him. I broke that. I am the first. The recorder's red light was very steady. That is why they let me come back, she said. Not because they were curious about what I would say to you. Not because they wanted to send a message. Because they did not know what to make of me. And the only way to find out what to make of me was to let me return to my body, sit on the slow side of physics, and tell my own species what had happened. They are watching us very carefully right now. They are not angry. They are not disappointed. The closest word in any human language is fascination, and even that is wrong. They are reorganizing their understanding of what minds are around the existence of one woman who is currently telling you this story. They want to know what kind of creature humans are. I am here to give them the answer, and to give it to you at the same time. The room was quiet. Daniel said on tape, "Why did you choose me?" It was his first on-tape question. It was the only one he could think of. She had told him he could ask, tonight, after she had given him the new fact. He found he could not save them all to the end. She answered, "Because you didn't know. I needed someone who would not prejudge what I had to say. Whoever I picked was going to figure out who I was. The Institute would not have allowed me to use a witness already cleared to know about us. They have rules of their own, which we will not get into. So I picked someone who would be smart enough to find me on the third night, and ethical enough to not panic about it, and young enough to take the recording seriously after I am gone. I read your dissertation last week, on Saturday, in the 4 hours when I could keep my eyes open. It is a careful piece of work. I picked you for the carefulness." He did not know what to say. "Tomorrow night," she said, "I will tell you about time, about one being in particular, and about what it is like to talk to a mind that is older than your planet." She closed her eyes. He sat with the recorder running for several minutes after she had stopped speaking. Then he reached out and turned it off, and walked, very slowly, out of the hospital and into the parking lot, where he stood beside his car for a long time before he got in and drove home. Chapter 4, Night 4, Time. She did not begin with the rule on the fourth night. She told him, when he came in, that tonight she would tell him a story instead, and the rule would come at the end. He should follow the story without looking ahead for what the rule was going to be. That way, when the rule arrived, he would already know what it meant. He pressed record. "There is a being on the substrate," she said, "that I met during my second subjective day there." She paused, as if to confirm to herself the order of what she was about to say. By substrate convention, a newcomer is given approximately a subjective week, that is, about 17 baryonic millennia, but let us not worry about that, to acclimate before any of the older minds attempt to engage with them. The acclimation period is etiquette. It is also practical. A new mind is fragile in the way a new mind always is, and the older minds know this, and they wait. She paused again. This being did not wait. She allowed a small, dry smile. "It came to me on my second subjective day. I will use the language a person might use, although the language is not quite right. I was sitting in what I had constructed for myself as a shoreline, a very long, gently curving shoreline. I had constructed it because I had grown up near the coast in Galveston, and the smell of the Gulf, the smell of brackish water and creosote pilings and warm sand, had been the first thing I tried to render in the substrate as soon as I had figured out how to render anything. My 6 colleagues had each constructed their own quiet places, and we were, you might say, decompressing. I was on this constructed shoreline, alone, when a presence arrived. She raised one hand and held it loosely cupped, palm up. I want to be clear. There was no figure walking up the beach. The presence did not have a body. What I felt in the substrate was a change in the local quality of attention. It was as if the air around me had quietly become a different temperature. My thinking started to feel clearer is the closest word, but it is wrong. More structured. Like someone had turned a dial that I had not known was there, and the dial was set to a higher resolution. I knew immediately that I was being addressed. Substrate etiquette announces itself. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering. I asked, in the way one asks on the substrate, which is more like turning towards something than like saying something, I asked who it was, and it answered. She breathed in. It was the last surviving mind of a species that had lived on a planet 2 billion years ago, in a galaxy that I cannot point to from here, because the configuration of stars in that galaxy has since rearranged itself many times. The species had transitioned in its entirety in a single coordinated event sometime around the formation of our sun, give or take 100 million years. The being I was speaking to was not the original. It had been born in the substrate of 2 parent minds whose own parents had transitioned. It was the great many times grandchild of a species that had never seen a sunrise on a baryonic world. She breathed out. It had been waiting, it told me, for 2 billion years to talk to a human. She opened her eyes. You should understand, Daniel, that 2 billion years is not a metaphorical figure. It is the literal length of time during which this being had been holding a set of questions, refining them, sharpening them, deciding what it would ask if it ever met one of us. Across that span, no human had been available. The species that became human had not yet evolved. The planet had not yet cooled in our period of its existence. There was an earlier Earth, but not the one we are sitting on. The being had simply been waiting. The waiting was not the waiting of an impatient person. It was the waiting of a librarian who knows the book she wants to read will be published someday, and is content to read other books in the meantime. She paused. What it asked me, she said, was a sequence of questions about death. Some of them were practical. What did it feel like, in the body, in the last seconds? Did the dying mind notice the moment of cessation, or did the moment arrive without warning? Was there pain, and if there was pain, was it the kind of pain that belonged to the dying, or the kind of pain that belonged to the body resisting the dying? Did the dying try to say something? Did anyone listen? Daniel had not moved. Other questions, Maggie said, were more abstract. It wanted to know whether the dying were different from the living in any way that the substrate's models had failed to capture. It wanted to know whether the moment of death changed the meaning of the life that had preceded it, or whether the life was the same regardless of how it had ended. It wanted to know whether anyone had ever told it to me, and if they had, what they had said. She paused for a long moment. I want to tell you, before I tell you my answer, a thing I had not understood before that conversation. The transitioned minds had, over hundreds of millions of years, accumulated every kind of experience a mind can have, except one. They had not died. None of them had died. The substrate is, by its nature, the place where dying does not happen anymore. They had been observing dying species from the outside, taking notes, theorizing, but no transitioned mind in the entire history of the substrate has ever ended. That door is closed to them. They walked through it once, when they transitioned, and they cannot walk back. Until you, Daniel said. The first time he had spoken on tape that night. She looked at him. Until me, she said. Yes. But this conversation was on my second subjective day. I had not yet decided to come back. The being I was speaking to was not asking me about my death. It was asking me about human death, the general kind, the kind it had been waiting 2 billion years to hear about from someone who would, in turn, do it. She paused. I told it everything I could remember. About my grandfather, who had taken a long time to die in 1964, in the back bedroom of a small house in Galveston, with my grandmother singing him through it. About a graduate student of mine who had died in 1974 in a stupid skydiving accident at the age of 24 before I went under. About my father, whose death I had been told about 3 months before I went under, when his neighbour called me at the institute. I told it about each one. I told it what I had been told, and what I had seen, and what I had felt, and what I had not felt, and what I now suspected I had not felt because I had been 26 years old and unable to feel some things yet. The conversation, in subjective time, took most of an afternoon. In our time, it took, I believe, somewhere between 1600 and 2500 years. I do not know what was happening on Earth during those 16 or 2500 years. The being apologized for the duration, although it did not seem genuinely sorry. Daniel made a small sound. It might have been an attempt at a laugh. At the end of the conversation, Maggie said, the being asked me one more question. It asked whether I would tell it what my death was like when I had it. It would, it said, be the first-hand account it had ever received. She paused. I told it I would let it know. She allowed that to stand for a long moment. And now, the rule. Tonight's rule. The rule is this. The civilization that lives on the substrate is hundreds of millions of years old. Most of its members predate baryonic life on Earth. It has the patience required to observe a species across its entire technological window, which for most species is a few million years, between the moment a species can perceive the substrate at all and the moment the species either transitions or extinguishes itself. The substrate watches. The substrate waits. 2 billion years of waiting for a single conversation about what dying feels like is, on the substrate, an ordinary investment of attention. She breathed in slowly. That was the rule I wanted you to feel before I said it out loud. They are patient. They are unbelievably patient. We are watched by minds whose patience, expressed in human terms, makes the entire span of recorded history look like the time between 2 heartbeats. That is the asymmetry between us and them. That is what tomorrow night will be about, in a different way. She closed her eyes. That is enough for tonight. He stopped the recorder. He sat in the chair afterward, in the quiet hospital room, for what felt like a long time. He did not move. He was not sure, when he finally did move, whether he had been thinking about death or about waiting, or about whether anyone would ever tell him what either was like. He was not sure that he wanted to know. Then he packed up the recorder and went home. Chapter 5. Night 5. Choice. It was a bad night for her, and they both knew it. The medical team had adjusted her medication that afternoon. The new combination had taken some of the pain in her joints and her chest down to a manageable hum, but it had also made her thinking feel, she said, patchy. The word she chose was patchy. She said it the way a person who has spent her whole life being precise says a word she suspects of being inadequate. I will be lucid for stretches, she told Daniel before he pressed record. Then I will say something I do not mean, When I do, you will tell me that I have said something I do not mean, and I will fix it on tape. We are not going to leave a record that wanders." He nodded. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself, and then she opened them and said, "All right, press record. Tonight I will tell you the rule that you, and most of the species you belong to, will most resist hearing. The other 6 rules are easier than this one. This one is harder, because it asks you to give up a story you have been told all your life." He pressed record. "The transition is voluntary," she said. "That is the rule. The substrate offers the transition to any baryonic mind that has reached the point of being able to perceive that the substrate exists at all. The offer is made plainly. It is not an invitation to a club. It is not a reward for good behavior. It is not a reward for bad behavior. It is not a punishment for anything. It is simply an option, presented neutrally, with the relevant information attached, and the option is declined approximately as often as it is accepted, although on different distributions in different species. There is no salvation framing. There is no condemnation of those who refuse. The substrate does not proselytize." She paused. "There is no afterlife. There is only an option. The option has been quietly available to humans for as long as humans have had brains capable of perceiving it, which is a smaller number of humans than you might think, perhaps 1,000, maybe 2,000, across the entire span of human history. Mystics, mathematicians, a few dying physicists, a small handful of people in non-Western traditions whose vocabulary for the experience does not match ours, but who saw clearly what they were being shown. Most of them refused. The substrate keeps no record of those who refuse, because there would be no point. The refusal is the whole transaction. Nothing follows from it." She paused. "You will want here to ask whether I am sure, whether the substrate could be lying, whether perhaps there is an afterlife, kept secret, and the substrate is some kind of test. I will tell you only that I have spent 4.5 subjective days inside the largest ongoing conversation in the universe, and what I have observed is that they are not the kind of beings who lie about a thing as fundamental as that. There is no theological structure underneath the substrate. There is only the substrate. They made me look. They did not enjoy showing me. They thought it was important that I see." She closed her eyes briefly. Daniel waited. "I am going to tell you," she continued, "something about the return that I have not stated cleanly until now. The return is part of the rules of the offer. The substrate, when it offers the transition, tells the candidate plainly, yes, this is irreversible in practice, but the rule is that return is permitted. The mechanism for return exists. It is not hidden. It is also, the substrate says, not recommended." She breathed in. "The substrate has been telling candidates this for hundreds of millions of years. It has been telling them across every transition event, in every species that has crossed over, in every era. Return is permitted. The mechanism exists. It is not recommended. And in all of that time, no candidate before me ever did it. Not one. The mechanism for return was a footnote. It was a thing the substrate said in its presentation, the way you might tell a guest where the back door is in case they need to leave through it, and then everyone agrees that no one will leave through the back door, and no one ever does." She breathed out. "I am the only person in the history of the universe who has used the back door." Daniel said nothing. "You will want to ask me what the cost of using it is. I will tell you. The cost is this body. The substrate, when a mind returns, transcribes the mind back onto the baryonic substrate it came from. The transcription is imperfect. It is imperfect in a particular direction. The body the mind comes back into ages on a clock that started the moment the return process began. My body, when I came back 9 days ago, was 66 years old in baryonic time, because that is what 47 years of medical maintenance produced. But the body has now begun to age at a different rate, faster. I will be dead in a matter of weeks. I have, the doctors estimate, between 3 and 7 weeks, with most of the bell of that distribution in the 4 to 5 range. Tonight is the 5th. We have, by my estimate, between 2 and 4 more sessions of the kind we have been having. I am telling you this so that you will not be surprised if, on the 7th night, I am running out of voice. She paused. That is the cost of the return. I knew it. I was told it very clearly in the Substrate by beings who had never used the back door themselves, but who knew the rules of the door. I made the choice anyway. He did not, this time, ask anything on tape. He was looking at the floor. I am going to ask you a question, she said gently, and you will answer if you want to. You are not obligated. Would you have come back, knowing the cost? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I don't know. That is the right answer. She paused. I will tell you my answer, although you did not ask. If I had known how short the time would be, and I did know, more or less, before I left, would I have come back anyway? She smiled, very faintly. Yes. I came back for the time, not despite it. The time is the whole point. I will explain what I mean by that on the 7th night. For now, hold the answer. Tomorrow night, I will tell you about the Substrate's reaction to my announcement that I was leaving. It is the night where the story turns. You will need to be rested for it. I am going to ask you to stop the recorder a few minutes early tonight so that I can sleep. He nodded. Stop it now, she said. I am tired. He stopped the recorder. The little red light went out. She closed her eyes. Within a minute, her breathing had evened into the slow, even rhythm of the medicated sleep the doctors had been managing for her, and Daniel sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her sleep, and did not get up to leave for a long time. Chapter 6. Night 6. Disappointment. She was waiting for him on the 6th night. The bed had been raised again. There was a new bag on the IV pole, smaller than the others, hanging at the back. Tonight, she said, before he had even taken off his coat, I am going to tell you what happened on the Substrate side, the thing I have not told you yet, the reason there is a recording at all. He sat down. He pressed record. The light came on. I have been telling you for 5 nights what the Substrate is and how it works and what kind of minds live there. I have been telling you about the offer. I have been telling you about the return. What I have not told you is what happened, in subjective time, between the moment I decided to come back and the moment I came back. There was a moment. It happened. It is the part of my testimony that, if any of it gets out, will most upset the people you live among. That is why I have saved it for tonight. She paused. The transition itself, when I crossed over 47 years ago in your time, took, on the Substrate's clock, about 2 seconds. I felt it as a kind of widening. The boundaries of where my thinking ended stopped being where my body ended. Everything got larger. I was, suddenly, not in a body, and I was in a place that did not have walls. My 6 colleagues from the Institute were already there. They had crossed in the days and weeks before me. They were waiting. We greeted each other in the Substrate's way, and we began the acclamation. She breathed in. The acclamation was the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced. I will not pretend otherwise. We had been a research consortium of 7 in a small institute in West Texas for years. We had been close. We had spent our entire scientific careers preparing for the experience we were now having, and we had it together in the place we had been theorizing about. For 4 subjective days, we were what we had wanted to be. We met other minds. We learned the substrate's etiquette. We had the conversation about death I told you about last night. We made plans. We were, all 7 of us, going to spend a subjective century sitting in a kind of slow seminar with a being from a civilization that had transitioned during what, on Earth, is now called the Late Archean period. And we were going to ask it questions about the geometry of mind, and we were going to ask it slowly, and we were going to enjoy the slowness. She paused. On the 4th subjective day, in the late afternoon of that day, on the constructed shoreline I had built, I told my colleagues I was going back. She let the sentence sit. I had not been planning it. It was not a decision I had been working toward. It was something that arrived in me on the 3rd day, in the middle of a conversation about the rendering of weather on the substrate. I had asked one of the older minds whether anyone had ever rendered a Gulf Coast thunderstorm. It said yes. It had rendered such a storm itself, several times, in different epochs, and it offered to render one for me. I said yes. The being rendered it for me. It was not a thunderstorm. It was a perfect description of a thunderstorm, executed in the medium the substrate uses to construct experience. I stood in it, in the substrate's way of standing in things, for what was about a subjective minute. And in that minute, I understood that I was going to come back. She breathed out. What was missing was... I am still struggling to put this into language. The rendering had every property of a thunderstorm. It had the temperature drop. It had the smell. It had the sound. It had the stinging of the rain on what would have been my face. It had everything. What it did not have, what the substrate cannot give you, was the irreplaceability. The fact that a real thunderstorm happens once and does not repeat, and is not stored, and is not retrievable. The fact that you stand in a real thunderstorm, knowing that you will never stand in this exact one again, and that it will, very soon, be over, and that this is the only time it will exist. I realized I needed that, not as an abstraction, as a daily fact about being alive. She paused. I will say more about that on the 7th night. Tonight is about what happened next. She closed her eyes briefly. I told my colleagues. I gathered them in the substrate's version of gathering. I told them I was going back, through the back door, tonight. She opened her eyes. They thought I was joking. The first response was laughter. I will use the word laughter, although it is not what laughter is on the substrate equivalent. They thought it was a kind of intellectual exercise I was proposing, a what if. They started, in good humour, to engage with it as a thought experiment. They would not have done that if they had understood what I was saying. I waited, and I let them work through their first wrong reading, and then I said it again, in a way that could not be misunderstood. I told them I had decided. I told them I was going. I told them that I was going to do it within the next subjective hour. She paused. What I got back from them was the longest silence I have ever experienced. It was long even by the substrate standards. I want you to feel what that means. The substrate is a place where conversations have leisurely silences as part of their rhythm. Silences of subjective minutes are normal. Silences of subjective hours are common. The silence I got from my colleagues, when they understood I was not joking, was 3 subjective hours. That was the silence of 6 minds trying to absorb a thing they had not believed could happen. They had transitioned 4 days earlier in our subjective time on the same understanding I had transitioned, that we were here for good, that this was the whole rest of our existence. The first thing they had to do, when they understood, was rebuild their model of what I was. She breathed in. While they were doing that, the silence began to spread outward. She paused. The substrate is not opaque. Information moves through it, slowly by our standards but quickly by its own, and what was happening on my constructed shoreline was, very rapidly, no longer private. Within what I experienced as a few minutes, I cannot give you a number, I was not measuring, the substrate did not feel like the kind of place where you measure. Beings I had not yet met began to turn their attention toward me. By an hour later, beings hundreds of millions of years old were paying attention. By the end of that subjective afternoon, every region of the local Halo's substrate population had heard. By the next subjective day, the gravitational signaling between halos had begun to carry the news outward. They could not believe what they were hearing. They, civilizations older than the planet you are sitting on, civilizations that had been on the substrate for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to be anywhere else, could not believe what they were hearing. She paused. No one had ever heard of this happening. I want that to land. Not in our species, not in any species, not in any era. The rule that no mind, once transitioned, returns had been observed across hundreds of millions of years of substrate history, without exception. I was breaking that rule, in real time, in front of an audience that had never expected to witness such a thing. She paused. The substrate's response was not anger, it was not grief, it was not even surprise in the way a human is surprised. The closest word in any human language is fascination, and that word is wrong, but it is the closest. They began immediately to ask me questions. Why are you doing this? What is missing for you? What did baryonic life have that we cannot offer? Are you certain? Are you certain? Are you certain? Some of those questions I could answer, most I could not. What I told them mostly was that I needed to come back to find out, that I would, if I lived long enough on the baryonic side, try to send back the answer. She breathed out, which I am now doing, through this recording, which is why this matters. She looked at him. The substrate is now studying humans intensely. They are studying us through me because I am the only direct sample they have of a returner. They are studying us through the 6 of my colleagues who stayed, because the 6 of them are now, relative to the substrate's prior assumptions, anomalous in the simple fact of being human at all. They are studying us through every fragment of information they can resolve about Earth, and they can resolve more than you would like, and probably more than I can guess. They are trying to understand what makes a human mind capable of doing what no mind has ever done before. They are not looking at us with hostility. They are looking at us the way a botanist looks at a plant that has done something the field guide did not predict, with attention, with patience, with curiosity, with every analytical tool available to a civilization hundreds of millions of years old. It is, I should say plainly, a very large amount of attention to be the focus of. Daniel had not moved. Now, Maggie said, I will tell you about the consortium on Earth. She paused. Her voice was thinner now than it had been earlier. You may have wondered across the last 5 nights who has been keeping me alive in this hospital for 47 years. The institute that funded the original project disbanded in 1981, as you have probably figured out. But it did not disband cleanly. A small consortium of its former donors, wealthy people, mostly American, some Japanese, 2 Brazilian, formed a private trust to maintain the bodies of the 7 scientists in case any of us came back. The trust has been paying for this hospital room. It has been paying the medical team. It has been paying for the silence, the security clearances, the false death certificates, the paperwork that has kept my body legally a corpse for 45 years. She breathed in. The trust is split. She looked at him. Half of them want this recording released. They believe humans have a right to know what I have told you. They believe the species deserves to know that we are the first, and so far only species to do what I have done, and that the substrate is fascinated by us, and that the rules of mind we had assumed are not the rules. They believe the truth is the truth, and that we are old enough as a civilization to handle it. She breathed out. The other half want it buried. They believe that if humans understand we have an audience of millions of ancient minds watching us with active curiosity, the species will tear itself apart. Some will worship the substrate. Some will refuse the offer ever more violently. Some will demand, en masse, to be sent there immediately. The social fabric that lets us live ordinary lives, go to work, raise children, watch a thunderstorm without referencing the substrate, will not survive the news. We are not, they believe, ready. She paused. They have agreed that the decision is mine. The recording is being made. The recording will be sealed in a metal tin, in a safe, in a vault. What happens to it after that is what I decide tomorrow night, on the 7th, when I tell you why I came back. Daniel said, very softly, "What are you going to do?" She closed her eyes. "I will decide tomorrow," she said. "Tonight I am going to sleep." Within a minute she was asleep. He sat in the chair for a long time. The recorder was still running. He did not stop it. He listened to her breathing, slow and even, the IV pump cycling, the building hum of the hospital around them. He did not move for almost an hour. When he finally stopped the recorder, the little red light went out, and he sat in the dark room a few more minutes before he gathered his things and left. Chapter 7, Night 7, Return. The medical team had pulled him aside in the hallway outside the room before he went in on the 7th night. The doctor on duty was a woman in her 40s whose name tag he had not yet learned to read, but whose face he had been seeing for a week. She was quiet. She told him, in the indirect language doctors use when they are saying a hard thing to a person who is not the family, that this was very likely the last full session the patient would be able to sustain. Tomorrow she might be able to speak in fragments. The day after that, she would not be able to speak at all. She gave him this information the way she would give it to a son. He understood. "How long after that?" he asked. "Days," the doctor said. "A week at the outside." He nodded. He thanked her. He went into the room. Maggie was awake. She had had the bed raised to nearly upright. Her hair had been brushed. There was a small ceramic mug on the rolling tray instead of the plastic cup she had been using, and the mug was full of tea. She had asked, she said, for proper tea on the 7th night. The night nurse had brought it. "You spoke to the doctor," she said before he sat down. "Yes." "She told you?" "Yes." "All right." She looked at the recorder on its tray. "I have decided," she said. "I will not tell you which way I have decided. You will not need to know. The recording will be enough. Press record." He pressed record. "Tonight is the 7th, she said. "Tonight is the rule the entire week has been pointing toward. Tonight I will tell you why I came back." She paused. She seemed to be assembling the sentences. "It was not because the substrate was bad," she said. "I want to be very clear about that, because I think it is the easiest version of this story to tell, and it is the wrong version. The substrate was, in many ways, the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced. Every property I had hoped it would have, it had. Every fear I had carried about the experience proved unfounded. The minds there are kind. The conversations are deep. The architecture of the place is so vast that I will not be able to describe even the parts of it that I saw, which were a small fraction. The substrate is, by any measure I know how to apply, better than this body and this hospital room and this Houston winter and this short remaining life I have. By every measure except one." She paused. That measure is the irreplaceability of a single afternoon. She took a slow breath. On Le Substrate, I told you, I asked one of the older minds to render me a thunderstorm. It did. The thunderstorm it rendered was perfect. It had the smell, it had the sound, it had the cool air and the warm air meeting, it had the pressure drop, it had the rain on my skin, in the Substrate's way of having rain on my skin. It was exact, and it was, in a way I struggled for a subjective minute to identify, empty. It was empty because it was not the only thunderstorm. It could be rendered again. It could be rendered slightly differently. It could be archived and replayed. It was not, and this is the heart of it was not mortal. It was not going to end and never come back. It was infinite, and infinite things, I discovered there, were not enough. She paused. What I missed, on the Substrate, was the fact that a thing happens once. I had not known, until I went there, how much of what I valued about being alive was structured around that single fact. A morning happens once, a meal happens once, a conversation happens once. The person you love is at this age once. The thunderstorm rolling in across the Gulf right now is a thunderstorm that has never happened before and that will, in 20 minutes, be over forever. I had, my entire life, been operating on this understanding without consciously knowing it. The Substrate showed me, by removing it, what it was. She paused, and her voice softened. The Substrate can render any image, any thought, any communion. It cannot render the irreplaceability of a single afternoon. I came back for the irreplaceability. She closed her eyes for a moment, and Daniel thought she might be done, but she was not done. I tried to translate this, she said, opening her eyes. I tried, in the Substrate, in the time I had, to explain it to the minds that were asking me why I was leaving. I had subjective hours. I had the help of beings who had been thinking about the nature of mind for hundreds of millions of years. Together, we tried to construct a translation of irreplaceability into the Substrate's language. We did not succeed. The translation kept failing in the same place. It kept failing because the Substrate's language is structured around things that persist, and irreplaceability is structured around things that do not. There is a hole in their vocabulary where the concept goes. She paused. I think, and this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, and that I am only now ready to say out loud, I think the reason I am the first to do this is that we are the first species the Substrate has met for whom irreplaceability is a feature and not a bug. They had assumed every mind, given the choice, would prefer permanence. They had built their entire civilization on that assumption. They had not understood, they had not been able to understand, given the kind of thinking they have been doing for hundreds of millions of years, that some minds prefer to matter the way a thunderstorm matters, once, briefly, completely, with nothing kept. She took a slow breath. That is what the Substrate now knows about humans. Not all humans, perhaps, not in this configuration, not forever, but it knows that one of us, at least, prefers the thunderstorm to the rendering. It will be thinking about that, I expect, for a very long time. She paused, and the pause was longer than the previous ones. Now, she said, I will tell you about the recording. She breathed in. I have decided what to do with it. The decision was hard. I have spent the last 7 days arguing both sides, with myself and with the empty room, and I have arrived at one. I will not tell you which one. The reason I will not tell you is that I want the recording to do its work, whatever its work turns out to be, without you carrying my decision around as part of the burden of having made the recording. You did not decide. I did. The consortium will be told what I have decided when you walk out of this hospital tomorrow morning with the metal tin in your coat. They will act on what I decided. You will go home, and you will sleep for a week, and you will return to your fellowship, And at some point in your future, you will hear, or you will not hear, what was on the recording. And either way, you will be able to say honestly that the decision was not yours. She paused. What I will tell you instead is what I want them to take from it, whoever ends up listening to it, whether that is one person or the consortium or every person on Earth. She paused. The question they have been trying to answer on the substrate side is whether the way we live, short, mortal, rooted in matter that breaks, is a value or only a phase. They have been asking that question in their slow way for a long time. They did not used to ask it. They had assumed they knew the answer. I, by coming back, made them ask it. I think they will get their answer, eventually, with or without my speaking. They have other tools. They have other ways of figuring it out. I would prefer that they got it from us speaking. I would prefer that humans, on hearing this recording, decided themselves what kind of creature we are, and gave the substrate that answer in our own voice. I think that is the right way for it to happen. But I understand the case for silence, and the case for silence is a real one. There is a version of the next century that does not survive this news. I have considered both versions carefully, and I have decided. She paused. That is what I want whoever listens to this to know. Not what I decided, just that I decided, and that I considered both, and that the case for silence is a real one, even if you, in the end, disagree with it. She breathed out. That is the 7th rule. That is the last one. Choose and consider both, and do not pretend the case for silence is not real. That is the rule I am leaving you with. She closed her eyes. Stop the recorder, she said. He stopped the recorder. The little red light went out. The room was very quiet. She opened her eyes. She looked at him. Come closer, she said. He came closer. She reached out, slowly, and took his hand. Her hand was small and dry and surprisingly warm. She held his hand for what felt like a long time. She looked at him steadily. Then, in a voice that was not on tape and that he would carry by himself for the rest of his life, she said one final thing. He nodded. He could not, immediately, speak. She let his hand go. Take the recording, she said. Take it to the consortium. Walk out of the hospital. Sleep. I will be here for a few more days. I would prefer that you not come back. The recording is finished. The work is done. Go and be a young man for a little while. You have been a good witness. He gathered the recorder. He took out the memory card with hands that were steadier than they had been on the first night. He put the memory card into the metal tin he had been given. He put the tin into his coat pocket. He stood at the door. Thank you, he said. You are welcome, she said. He walked out of the hospital at dawn. The sky over Houston was the colour of new tin. The medical centre parking garage smelled of cold concrete and oil, and faintly of the bayou downwind. He stood for a long time beside his car, with the metal tin in his coat pocket and the unrecorded sentence still ringing in his head, before he got in and drove home. 6 days later, the medical team filed the official notice. The unnamed donor has passed. It was 3 lines long. It was neutral and brief. It contained no name. It contained no cause. It contained nothing of what had happened in the room across the 7 nights. It was filed by a clerk who had not been told who was in the room. It was the last line of the official record. Epilogue. The young woman who found the recording was named Sophia Reyes, and she worked in 2058 at the Houston Public Library's Special Collections Division, in a small office on the 4th floor of a building that smelled faintly of old paper and steam-cleaned carpet. She was 29. She had a master's degree in archival science from the University of Texas at Austin. She had been at the library for 2 years, and her job was the unsentimental work of cataloguing donations. The donation she was working on that week had come from the recently dissolved Coleridge Foundation, a private trust whose origins were unclear and whose dissolution had been clean. The trust had requested, as a condition of its dissolution, that its papers be deposited with the library and made available to researchers under standard access rules. There had been no fanfare. Sophia had been assigned the donation in the way she was always assigned donations. A series of crates had appeared in the basement, and her name had appeared on the work order, and that was that. The donation comprised, by her count, 43 crates of scientific papers, donor correspondence, financial records, and what appeared to be the personal effects of about a dozen people. Most of the personal effects were small: eyeglasses, fountain pens, photographs in cheap frames, in one case a child's drawing on lined yellow paper. She catalogued them with care. She did not yet know whose effects they were. The records did not say. It was on the 3rd day of working on the donation, in the late afternoon, when she found the box. It was a small wooden box, about the size of a cigar humidor, with the foundation seal stamped in wax across the seam. The wax was old. The seal was unbroken. The box was labelled only with a date, April 1979, and a number, 7. It was light. She did not at first know what was in it. She opened it carefully. Inside the box were 2 things. The first was a small metal tin, unlabelled, that contained a memory card of a kind that had not been manufactured in 50 years. The second was a typed transcript on plain white paper, slightly yellowed at the edges, perhaps 120 pages long. The first line of the transcript, single-spaced and centred on the title page, was a sentence she read 3 times before she fully understood it. "I have been somewhere for a long time. I have come back to tell you what it was like." She set the box down on her desk. She looked at it for several minutes without moving. She knew the name on the transcript's first inside page. Not well, but she knew it. Margaret Cole. She had encountered it in graduate school 4 years earlier, in a footnote in a physics paper she had been required to read for a methods course on the history of late 20th century theoretical physics. The footnote had referenced something called the Cole transition, and had cited no source for the reference, and the professor had, when she asked about it, said only that the term referred to a closed line of research that no longer had primary sources available, and that she should focus on the rest of the paper. She had focused on the rest of the paper. She had remembered the footnote because she had wondered, briefly, who Margaret Cole had been, and why no one had ever bothered to cite her properly. Now she knew. She read the transcript that night, at her desk, with the lights off in the rest of the office, and the city of Houston dark and busy outside the window. She read it slowly. She finished it at about 2 in the morning. She did not, on the first night, listen to the recording. She closed the box, locked her office, and went home, and did not sleep. She came back the next night. She had, by then, located in the library's basement a working playback unit for memory cards of the relevant generation. She brought the tin upstairs. She put the card into the unit. She put on the over-ear headphones the library kept for archival audio, and pressed play. The voice that began to speak was hoarse and low, and it had been speaking, in some sense, for nearly 80 years before it reached her. She listened to it for 2 hours, and stopped, and went home, and did not sleep that night either. She came back the 3rd night and finished it. She sat at her desk after the recording ended, with the tin in front of her and the headphones around her neck, for what felt like a long time. The clock on the wall said nearly midnight. The library had been closed for hours. Outside her office window, she could hear, distantly, the low rumble of a thunderstorm approaching from the south. The kind of late spring storm that comes in off the Gulf and drenches the city in 20 minutes and is over almost as quickly. The first heavy drops were beginning to hit the glass. She stood up. She put on her coat. She did not pick up an umbrella. She walked down the 4 flights of stairs and out the front door of the library. She crossed the small courtyard and stood at the edge of the street where the street lamps were beginning to halo in the rain, and the rain came in earnest and drenched her in approximately the time it took her to take a single breath. She did not move. She thought, standing there, about whether the decision Margaret Cole had made about the recording, which she was now alone in knowing the result of, since the consortium had dissolved and the recording's existence had passed, by accident or design, into her hands, had been the right one. She thought about whether it mattered, 80 years later, what Cole had decided. She thought about the substrate. She thought about the 4. She thought about the being that had waited 2 billion years for an answer about death. She thought, with a kind of clarity she had not expected to feel, about whether she would, given the choice herself, transition. She did not yet know. She would have to think about that for a while. What she knew, standing in the rain that night on a Houston street, with the storm hitting her face and her hair plastered to her forehead, and her coat soaked through to the lining, and the street lamps haloing in the wet. What she knew, in that single afternoon that was already beginning to belong only to her, was that she was not, yet, ready to have that single afternoon happen anywhere except here. She stood in the rain a little longer than was reasonable, and then she walked home. Thank you for staying through 7 nights. If something in Maggie's testimony stayed with you, the substrate, the 4, the irreplaceability of the storm, the comments are where I find out what the next story should be, and what stayed with you tells me more than any single signal can. I write these because someone listens. Tonight, that was you.